Global Farmer Network is all about amplifying farmers' voices and stories. And we here at the Global Farmer Network are so excited to be able to continue to support farmers' voices worldwide. Hello, I'm Delaney Howell, and today the Global Farmer Network is proud to announce the expansion of staff roles and leadership efforts into Africa, underscoring the organization's commitment to amplifying voices of farmers, promoting free trade, technology, sustainable farming practices, economic growth, and ensuring food security. Today, I'm chatting with two African farmers and two new staff members to the Global Farmer Network who will continue to elevate and promote efforts expanding the Global Farmer Network's presence into Africa and beyond. Ruramiso Mashumba, who is a farmer in Zimbabwe in Southern Africa, and Patience Koku, who is a farmer in Nigeria. Both have very unique backgrounds and stories and have been part of the Global Farmer Network as members for quite some time. But today we officially welcome them to the Global Farmer Network team to talk more about how their expansion will continue to lead Global Farmer Network's efforts in Africa and beyond. So let's kick it over to learning more about Patience and Ruramiso's backgrounds in agriculture, the Global Farmer Network, and some of their plans on how they're going to go about engaging farmers in Africa and beyond. So Ruramiso, I would really love to learn more about your background and how you got involved in agriculture since you didn't grow up necessarily on a farm.
I grew up in the capital city of Zimbabwe, Harare. My father worked in telecommunications and my mom was a nurse. And when I was 14, my dad decided to buy a farm in Marondera, where I live now. And it was more like a retirement plan for him, but he didn't really have a plan to farm. And I was moved to a school near the farm. So that was my first introduction to agriculture. The school was a very agri-based school, really taught agriculture in a commercial level. It was very, exciting to actually see commercial agriculture, which is very different from the environment I live, where I'm surrounded by many communal smallholder farmers on 1 to 4 hectare land, mainly subsistence farming and not really commercial farming. So there's a big difference between commercial farming and communal farming in Zimbabwe, and communal farming is the majority.
So you didn't obviously grow up on a farm. Your father bought a farm, like you said, at the age of 14. How did you know, or why did you decide then to go into that as your career path?
So the school I went to, Watershed College, is next to the farm, and the area is a very agriculture community. So one of the subjects that were offered at the school is agriculture. So automatically you had to do it and in high school. So that was my first introduction to agriculture. We used to have little gardens where we were growing vegetables, onions, and I really enjoyed it because I feel like I've always been a person who likes to reflect, sit in the garden, look at nature. So it really, I really could resonate with farming, although I'd never known it at a commercial level. And then further on, when I was 17 at the same school, I got an opportunity to do a diploma in agriculture. I was one of the few girls. 90% of our class was boys, and it was super tough. They didn't make it very feminine. We had to wear the boys' uniform. I don't know why. After now, I wonder why. We had to wear like khakis. And then it was tough. It was very practical. So you learned how to keep chickens, clean the layers in the where the laying birds are kept. You had to clean the piggery. So it was like very dirty and tough, and but then still I still enjoyed it. It was hard for me because the boys used to bully me a lot. Maybe because I was quiet, but I pulled through, and I got distinctions and passed, and then got an opportunity to go to the UK and further my education to do a bachelor's degree in agriculture.
So Patience, you also have a really unique background and also didn't grow up in agriculture. So tell us about your background and how you got into farming.
I studied political science, so a very far cry from agriculture. But I spent most of my adult life being an entrepreneur and in a fashion business. So I owned a business where I bought fashion from different parts of the world, and I had stores in Nigeria where I sold them. So I was basically just, in the fashion business, and had never, ever had a clue that I would be where I am today. But, here we are. So my background is pretty much politics, studied in school, and then a fashion entrepreneur for many, many years.
How did you make the transition then to start a farm and get out of fashion?
So I tell people that it was divine, I guess, because if I knew what I was getting into, I would never have ventured, because farming is by far the most difficult thing I've done in my life, but the most rewarding. And so we were basically looking for a new business. So we thought, oh, well, there's, it seems like there's an opportunity in farming. And so we went in there thinking we're going to be like rich real quick. We found out very quickly that that wasn't the case. So, but here I am many years on, still stuck, caught by the farming bug, and still pushing.
Ruramiso, I'm curious. You said that it was 90% men or male classmates that you had, and just a couple females in your class. Was that at the time the norm for agriculture in Southern Africa?
I would say yes. Agriculture is very male dominated in Zimbabwe, Southern Africa, a lot of part of Africa. There are very few women who participate in agriculture, at least at levels of ownership, levels of speaking for policy. Most of the people who are owning farms, doing big projects are men. So it was really, it was a true reflection of the country. And I remember when I finished my degree and I went back to farm, even conversations I would have with other farm managers, they would say, isn't this too difficult for a woman? People used to always question the fact my ability was based on my gender because I'm a woman. So this is not a place for women. But what I'm excited about now that I look back, it's been 10 years, and I reflect and I see how so many women are coming up in agriculture, how I've been able to be the voice for many that have come and that will come to see agriculture as an attractive opportunity, and to also listen to the voices is through platforms like Global Farmer Network, where they elevate the voice. Because many times the voices are silent in these rural areas. No one knows what people are going through. There are also some battles that women face, which probably are more different from men, because, for example, you can be targeted, there's robberies, so many bad things can happen to women. So there's so many things. So it's important for women voices to be heard in agriculture, and also for people to understand, because Zimbabwe is 70% of women are working at primary level, packing and doing all the menial jobs, or at least the primary jobs, but are not really getting the skills to then become the owners, or even the confidence. But I'm excited when I see so many women now, even the very communal with no education, seeing me as their role model and deciding to scale up their skills and become owners and speak at platforms, speak at policy levels.
That's amazing. And you're definitely, it sounds like, leading, one of the pioneers for women in agriculture in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. But you mentioned commercial farming versus communal farming. What's the difference there?
So the difference is communal farming is on small pieces of land. Mainly the areas are different. So there are areas called communal areas. These communal areas are not as fertile. So most of the indigenous people in Zimbabwe have a home. I have a communal homestead. I think everyone who's born in Zimbabwe has a communal homestead. So these are the areas where our great-grandparents live and they farm. They've been farming for years and years. They mainly grow maize, so it's a subsistence farming, and they don't really have like a proper job which gives them an income. The only income they get is from selling of those crops. So those are what we base as communal farming. There's lots of other definitions that you can find that talk of that type of setup. And they live like, there's some brown huts, they cook with firewood, they keep small livestock there as well. So that's communal farming. That's majority of farming in Zimbabwe. Then there's commercial farming. Commercial farming is as long as now you're farming to sell, it becomes commercial. So it can still be in a small scale, but as long as now you're selling, you now have access to money, and you can purchase equipment, or you can hire, or you can lease out, it becomes more commercial. So it's more the ability to sell. So when you have the business skills, the business acumen that is required for you to understand the agronomy, for you to understand marketing, for you to understand some basics, then you become more commercial. So, but we have also big commercial farmers who have sophisticated equipment, and some smaller commercial farmers who lease out equipment.
Patients in your portion of Africa in Nigeria, talk to us about what agriculture looks like there, what kind of crops are grown or livestock, and what are the typical sizes of those farms and the technology that they're using?
Yeah, okay, so agriculture, one thing I found out very quickly when we started farming was that agriculture in Nigeria and in many parts of Africa was still very far behind the rest of the world in terms of access to technology, what mechanization, basic tools that farmers use. And so here we grow a lot of basic cereals, like staples would be rice, corn, soybeans, cowpea, and then of course a lot of yams and cassava and those kind of things. But then one of the challenges we have here is that the farm holdings are very small. So, people own like a quarter of a hectare. And so it's essentially just farmers who are, using labor from their own families, doing just the amount of land that they can physically handle, because they would do everything, plow with what we call a hoe. There's a particular hoe for making ridges, and then plant with the family labor. So basically farmers here are limited to the labor resources within their own families. And that's really just because they don't have access to mechanization, or to the equipment that they would have otherwise been able to use to grow larger fields. And that's a big challenge.
So you mentioned that communal farming is a majority of Zimbabwe agriculture. How many farmers or communal farmers versus commercial farmers are in the country of Zimbabwe?
Well, I'm not sure if the data has been accurately collected, but based on the statistics that we get from our agri-techs, our agriculture extension officers, I would say 80% are, 70 to 80% are communal farmers, and then the 20% will be in the commercial range, depending on the different criteria in that commercial rate. But so majority will be communal farmers, farming mainly to feed themselves.
So does Nigeria also have this divide between commercialized farms and communal farms, or is that singular to Zimbabwe?
Well, lots of countries in Africa are very different, but there's lots of similarities at the same time. So I would say that majority of people, mainly I'll speak of Southern Africa, which I have an experience traveling. Most of the farms that I've seen are really small farms.
Okay, so here commercial farms are very few. 85% of the farm holdings are smallholder farmers. It's only in recent years that people are actually farming commercially, and this is just simply because of the math of it. So investing in a venture that's not most often than not here is not profitable, hasn't been appealing for commercial on a commercial basis because of the challenges that are there, with access to equipment, to seeds, and the technology that's required to grow food efficiently and profitably. So
I know of farms in Malawi where the farmers the land can even be less than 1 hectare, and they are farming using the hand hoes. They don't have access to certified seeds. They don't have access to fertilizers. Maybe they depend on donations or government for support. So in countries like Malawi, they would have even maybe a higher percentage of the communal farmers. I know farmers in Zambia as well. They have some commercial, but they also have this very similar culture to Zimbabwe. They have so then there's quite a lot of African countries, and I've been to Cote d'Ivoire. I've seen the farmers are really on small pieces of land. I've been to Rwanda. I've also seen that the farmers there at the same time, they're also on small pieces of land. So there's quite a majority of indigenous native Africans who still farm using very primitive methods of farming on small land, and very without the ability to commercialize their projects, and are struggling with even challenges like the access to the market, because when they're on a small piece of land, even if they have a little bit of surplus, they don't have storage facility, they don't have knowledge on where the markets are. So our challenges when we do, because I sit on different organizations where I in agriculture, and we when we discuss, majority of the challenges are very similar, only that some countries might have even worse challenges than others, but they're very similar.
And I think that is a challenge to have these smallholder farmers that don't have access to technology, but that's also the area of opportunity. And part of the reason I think that the Global Farmer Network is expanding into Africa. So we'll get more to that here in just a second. But Patience, how did you learn and run across the Global Farmer Network?
Okay. So I was nominated to the Global Farmer Network by Sarah, who was the executive director of the Alliance for Science, who I had bumped into in Nigeria when they were doing some communication training on GMO technology. And so I ran into them, and of course, I was always searching for the right tools, to farm in Nigeria. And I was very keen to know more about the technology, and why it wasn't available here. And I immediately began to look for ways to speak up towards, getting it here. And that's how I got nominated to the GFN.